Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Pisgah Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Pisgah. We are your hosts. I'm Drew, that's Mangler, and we are coming to you live from a glamping tent at the bike farm. Rest in peace.
That was glamping at its finest.
Well, Mangler, spring break is over.
Yep, time to get back to real world, and unfortunately our seasonal trails have closed up. So did you get a chance to check them all off your list this year?
No, not necessarily. I'll ride seasonal trails as they fall into my queue of things that I don't regularly ride, but my riding time being 80% on the weekends, I'm not super hyped on getting out on Cat Gap or Butter for weekend rides with all the foot traffic that comes off of the hatchery.
You know, I do see where you're coming from there. That's a good point because it can get busy. On my seasonal bingo card, I only got Cat Gap and North Slope this year, which is kind of a bummer because I do enjoy dropping down on Coon Tree or getting up into the pink beds. But North Slope's great. I think it's one of the highly underrated trails in the Front Range. I really like going out and linking together some of those closer trails right off of 276 close to town, Sycamore, North Slope, maybe Lower Black. But yeah, mostly I'm going to miss North Slope till it reopens in October.
Yeah, North Slope is one of those trails that just kind of falls off of my radar, and I kind of forget that it's there until the season's closed. Usually when I'm down in the Brevard Zone, I'm going out for like a Daniels Ridge or Bennett or Middle Black. It's hard to go past the, stables area, personally.
Yeah, I get that. So, like yourself, if you've driven from Asheville to Brevard any time in like the last, 6 years, you've probably seen a sign on the right before you go up and over the hill and drop down in Brevard that says Bike Farm.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising how many locals don't really know much about or even what the Bike Farm is.
Well, here's some news. The Bike Farm has moved to a new location much closer to the Pisgah Front Range, and some more changes have taken place. As they were wrapping up their move, I sat in the parking lot and heckled Cashin Smith until he came and sat down with me to do a podcast interview on how the Bike Farm came to be and what's new with their new updates.
I was born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 1978. I have a brother that's 5 years older. His name is Ryan. He lives right down the road. And he had a bicycle, so I got a bicycle. And I would chase him around on my bicycle. I think my mother really enjoyed us being outside the home. So a bicycle was a good way for us to be outside the home. We have a family farm down near Laurinburg, North Carolina, right on the Lumbee River, sand roads, rope swings and canoes. It was a great place to ride bikes as a kid. Fast forward to the bike farm, and our family farm is part of what, and for me, our family farm is part of what informed calling it the bike farm. The experience I had visiting my grandmother down there, just being a free-ranging kid, playing outside, riding my bike, swimming in the river, jumping from the rope swings. It was the spirit that I wanted to bring forth into this project. I now we say, oh, well, we're growing good times and great riders from the dirt up. But, I'd be lying if I said I had that kind of marketing genius or foresight. We've just kind of...
Oh, it's kind of accidental.
Yeah, we've just kind of captured on that as it went along. Eva, co-founder, co-owner of the bike farm, the woman that I'm fortunate enough to call my wife, she has different reasons for it being called the bike farm. And for her, it came from a slightly different place. Trying to be a mountain biker in Charlotte, North Carolina, equated to having long-suffering parents that were willing to drive great lengths to take me and my best buddy, Martin Wilkinson, riding. And so we had like Renaissance Park and Cane Creek back in the day, and we'd go riding. And, I imagine I got my first mountain bike. It was a teal specialized hard rock. I think it was like a 1990.
Okay.
Right? It was my first new mountain bike. My first race, Camp Carolina used to host a race as part of the NUMBA series, Naked Underwater Mountain Bike Association. But they did host a race, And I think in 1991, I came and participated in that race. And I think that was the first time I rode in Pisgah proper.
Like Camp Carolina right here in town, right?
Camp Carolina right down the road from us
Yeah.
right now. And I wasn't much of a camp kid because I liked my mother's cooking and I liked the comforts of home. And I didn't particularly like sharing a toilet with a bunch of other people, let alone a shower.
That you didn't know.
That I didn't know, yeah. But once, after my 7th grade year, so this was 1992, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so my dad sent me off to Camp Carolina just so that I wouldn't be present for the surgery, for the mastectomy, and for the starts of chemotherapy, right? So I came up to Camp Carolina. You know, I got fully immersed in Pisgah mountain biking the summer of 1992. And started a landscaping business probably in, well, landscaping is a fancy word. It was a lawn maintenance business in 1994. And for a while there, you know, my interest in 2 wheels ceded to my interest in 4 wheels and cutting grass and making a bunch of money. And again, bunch of money being a relative term. But but as a kid, man, I had a nice truck. I went to Appalachian State my freshman year.
This would be in 96?
97.
97?
Yeah, 97. And after my freshman year, my brother said, "Hey, man, you know, you really love snowboarding and you really love mountain biking. Have you considered Colorado?" Because he had been out to Colorado and skied a few times, and he knew that I wanted to go spread my wings a little bit. So I went out to Boulder. I ended up going to the University of Colorado Boulder. Quadrupled down on my love affair for mountain biking. This dude we called Tall Paul Clark, and he's 6'6", like $190 maybe. Had become friends, and he was like, "Hey man, you ought to come mountain biking with me." I was like, "Dude, I'm in." At that point, I had like a 1993 Specialized stump jumper with the first suspension fork that Specialized actually made. I think it was awesome. I actually drilled holes in the cranks because Anza had a set of cranks back then that had holes in the cranks for lighter weight. And so I took it over, I'm out in my, out on the porch of our house. And first, of course, I drilled the holes in the cranks of my brother's old 10-speed, right? Because I didn't want to blow up my bike if it didn't work.
Okay, yeah.
So I did the practice holes on my brother's old 10-speed. And then I drilled holes in the cranks of my mountain bike and took it out to the local bike shop, Bicycle Sport. It's still there on Selwyn. And the guys were like, "You dumb." You know, like if they had engineered those to have holes in them, they would have put holes in them. I still had that bike out in Boulder, Colorado. And, you know, now we're talking about maybe 1999. The love affair was rekindled, and just like it drove many of my decisions and much of my thinking.
I think bike riding does that to all of us.
Yeah. You know, we have, I bartended my way through college at CU, and I was racing bikes and bartending. We would close down our bar at midnight, and then we'd go sit at our friend's bar and unwind till 2 a.m. And then, you know, we would have a lot of friends that would go out after that and do things that, you know, nefarious things that keep you up late at night.
Well, nothing ever good happens at the after party.
My dad always said nothing ever good happens after midnight. So get your ass home by midnight. End of conversation. That's not true. Some good things happen after midnight, I've found in my experience, but I digress. But man, I would go home. You know, I'd go home at 2 a.m. because I knew that I wanted to ride my bike the next morning. And I knew that I really loved my husky dog, Sasha. So I would want to go home to Sasha and my bicycle. And I really credit the mountain bike with keeping me in line a little bit back then. And to this day, it's the only place really where the committee is quieted. You know, it's good for my soul. So, Boulder, Colorado, graduate from school out there.
What'd you major in?
Sociology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's kind of like one of those majors that you kind of have to like get a master's or higher in to get like the big boy job.
It's an interesting thing, right? Because that's one way of looking at it. My mother was a social worker. So I kind of knew about sociology. I took a sociology class, Sex, Gender, and Society 1. And I loved it. And I was like, this is what I'm going to school for. It wasn't because my mom, you know, had gone to school for sociology. But I really, really enjoyed it. And my thing was like, man, I'm using my degree bartending. I'm using my degree right now relating to you. You know, it's the study of human interaction, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I wasn't going for a master's. And, you know, beyond this and beyond relating to people, I certainly never pursued a career path in sociology. In 2005, I'd moved from Boulder to Westchester, Pennsylvania, and was working for a medical device company
That's outside of Philly a little
just
bit?
outside of Philly. Yeah, there's some pretty good riding up there, man. But it was cold. It was really cold. Everybody thought I would be just fine coming from Colorado, and
Dry cold and wet cold.
Whew.
Two different things.
man, it was the coldest I've ever been in my whole life. I lasted 6 months. I was living in this old 200-year-old farmhouse, single pane windows. Even my dog thought it was cold. So I had the opportunity to move to Asheville with that company, and I did in 2005, and I lived in Bent Creek. Coincidentally, that's the last time I really ever rode a road bike. So I was like, man, I'm only riding mountain bikes from now, you know. Like,
I mean, your neighborhood's some of the best trails in the area.
absolutely, and you know, just being in the woods was always my thing. In Boulder, riding up into those canyons was actually pretty fun on a road bike. But I always just rode the road bike to train for mountain biking. Mountain biking was always my primary love, you know, as it related to bicycles.
So yeah, you come back here in 2005.
Back here in 2005, 6 and 7, back to Boulder. Went through a breakup, you know, but didn't break up with my bike. And I'm hanging around in Boulder when I meet Eva in 2009. She graduated from NYU, moved back to Colorado, which is where her family is. She convinced her little sister to rent an apartment with her in Boulder. I think she spent like a week in that apartment before we met. So we're in Boulder. Early on, I asked Eva, like, hey, is there anything you'd like to check out? And she's like, you know, I went to Fort Lewis and I rode on the road team, but I've always wanted to try mountain biking. And I was like, well, right on.
Come on.
Yeah, let's do this. You should ask her about that, because she says I'm a horrible coach, which is pretty funny because I own a guide and coaching service. She broke her hand early on, and I swore to her that it was just a sprain, and she waited till I went to work and went to the hospital, and the lady checking her in at the desk, right? Like, not the physician, not the radiologist.
Honey, that looks broken.
She's like, honey, you got a broken hand. And she's like, thank you for affirming what I already know.
and just left?
No. She got a little splint. She didn't have health insurance, so they gave her a splint and sent her home. So, man, you know, 2011, I was ready to leave the medical device industry. I had moved to a startup focusing on preventative medicine. We were working on the early detection of mild cognitive impairment versus mild cognitive impairment mild cognitive impairment stable versus mild cognitive impairment progressive.
That sounds real exciting.
Well, yeah, and I should probably have that brain scan since I can't even remember. But it's basically the precursor to Alzheimer's, and we were looking at concussion as well. But by 2011, I knew that I was ready to combine my passion and vocation. And so Eva had come back here with me on a number of occasions to visit. And she had fallen in love. So we sold all of our belongings, which her father convinced us to do, which turned out to, I mean, you know, I guess it's a cool thing to purge. But when we got here, we didn't have a couch, which was pretty funny. We didn't have a bed table. We didn't have a bed, a bedside table rather. In 2012, we sell everything, and we set out on this road trip that we called the Good Dirty Fun Tour. And we had these wonderful dear friends, Abby and Ariel, and they were the demo drivers back then for the Santa Cruz bicycle company. And we kind of just tooled around behind them, you know, for a little bit there on the West Coast and the Northwest and parts of Canada. And we had the opportunity to meet some what I would call bicycle tourism outfitters. You know, we met the folks that put on Mountain Bike Oregon in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And we met the gentleman that runs Ashland Mountain Adventures. We met the folks at Yuba Expeditions in Downeyville. Kind of got to pick some of their brains, you know, and say, hey, you know, what have you done right? What have you done wrong? What would you do differently? Or just be in their presence, you know, and just check out what they were up to. And then that road trip culminated here in Pisgah Forest, like September 29th, 2012. We rolled up. We had a U-Haul with everything we owned that we hadn't sold, which was predominantly bicycles and a lawnmower. I had a lawnmower strapped to the front of a U-Haul trailer behind our Sprinter van.
Like a push mower?
Yeah, a push mower. Remember, I had a lawn maintenance business as a young person, and it's a good mower. I still have it.
Right on.
Yeah. And within like 2 hours, we were on a group ride, and we were pretty convinced that this was the right place to, you know, lay down roots and to sow the seeds of our vision for the bike farm, which was genuinely nothing more than a drawing. You know, literally it's a yellow pad drawing, which I guess counts as a business plan.
I mean, there's been business plans drawn on probably worse things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, Eva is the daughter of 2 artists, so it's only appropriate that the business plan would be a drawing, And that is how we arrived here in Pisgah Forest, North Carolina, to start the bike farm.
Said September 29th, 2012.
I think it was 29th. I don't know. It was something like that.
I incorporated Mangler Mixer, incorporated on that same date.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I always knew I loved you, Mangler, from the moment I met you.
So that's an interesting connection there.
Yeah, I like that.
How was your first original starting of the bike farm?
So we had this drawing, and I would call it, I think you would call it kind of a idealistic, hippie, commune type drawing.
Like teepees and like
well, not
fire
even,
rings.
not even. There were little hippie babies running around and dogs, and there was a creek, and my brother was kayaking in the creek because he did a lot of kayaking. My mom always talked about when medical marijuana became legal in North Carolina, she was going to turn our family farm into a grow operation. That was going to be her cash crop. That was going to be her big moment, right?
Yeah.
And so my mom's on the drawing. My mother never smoked weed in her whole life, but she was going to grow it, right? And she also never, I don't even know if she ever touched a gun, but in the drawing, she's standing there guarding her cash crop with a shotgun. Because I just had this vision of her with her cash crop, guarding her cash crop. And Eva's dad was there whittling a stick, and Eva's mom was doing some Tai Chi, and my dad was cutting some grass on a little John Deere lawnmower that we have at our family farm. And so we've got this drawing. And we get to town, and one of the first people we meet was Yaya Katechis, Dale Katechis' mother. Dale is Dale of Dale's Pale Ale.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Oh, Colorado, what are you doing here?" And Eva and I said, "Well, we're here to start the bike farm," and it was a drawing on a piece of paper, right?
But you guys are all excited to share about it.
We're fired up, right? We're fired up. And we had a plan. At this point, we had cooked enough to have a little plan, so I was able to kind of talk to her about what we were doing, and she says, "Does Chad Malis know about this?" And I said, "Ma'am, I don't know who Chad Malis is." She said, "Well, he's our director of marketing back in Colorado, and you call him, and you tell him I told you to call."
Did you know who she was when you met her?
No. But I loved her.
Yeah.
She was just one of those women that, she was fired up, man. She was just a fiery lady, and she just, you call Chad Malis, and you tell him I told you to call. And so that's exactly what I did. I called Chad Malis and I said, "Chad, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I just met Yaya, and she told me to call you and to tell you that she told me to call you."
He's like, "Who the hell is this?"
No, to the contrary, man. He was like, he just laughed. He's like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of like, "Oh yeah, Yaya she has a keen eye on our community outreach," or something like that, So he said, "Well, tell me what you're doing." And I told him what we were up to. And Eva has some computer savvy, so we had a website,
Mm-hmm.
right? He said, "Well, that sounds cool. Do you have a website?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. www.bike." We called it the Bike Farm Pisgah back then.
Okay.
And so he goes to our website. We hang up, goes to our website, and like 20 minutes later, he calls back. He's like, "Do you know all these people on your homepage?" All we had was a photo of our buddy Kyle Mears in Moab. He runs Whole Enchilada Shuttle Company.
Yep.
So we had a photo in front of Kyle's van with a bunch of old riding buddies, right? This day that we just had a great day riding. And I said, "Yeah, man, I know all these people." He's like, "Well, so do I. How do we not know each other?" And I said, "Well, Chad, I don't know." But it was a quick kind of background check, whatever you want to call it. And so the first project that we had the opportunity to work on was basically trying to convince Dale to buy this beautiful old farm called Shoals Fall Farm out by DuPont. And 143 acres, and 43 was an important number to Dale, and 143 was an important number to me, and I believe that I pointed that out. I'm not sure it was, really consequential enough to make that kind of investment, but nonetheless, Eva and I are trying to work on getting Dale to acquire this piece of land so we can, start this vision. And at the same time, a local fellow by the name of Evan Voss had introduced us to a friend of his that worked with Red Bull. And Red Bull was looking for, basically they're looking for a chunk of land to hold this dirt jumping competition, Dreamline. And I said, oh yeah. Absolutely, Evan. I know of a chunk of land. And so for the next like 6 months, I basically was just like, it made Eva a little uncomfortable, right? Because I was like trying to get this land acquisition to happen, and meanwhile saying to Red Bull, like, oh yeah, we can get this land acquisition to happen. They had come out and stuck a shovel in the dirt, and everybody high-fived and was like, this is the perfect place. And I was like, well, there's one problem.
We don't have it yet.
It's not ours, and it's not our potential partners either. You know, they were like, potential partner? Okay, you know, like you got 6 months. And so literally on like, 5 months and 29 days or something like that, Dale and I went and rode around out there. I think it was like December 4th or 5th of 2013. Went and rode around out there, and Dale kind of was like, yeah, man, this is cool. I can see it. I don't think anybody had ever taken him and ridden him around the property.
He just only like seen it like a link or something like that.
And Dale is a mountain biker. Like Dale needs mountain biking like I do, right? Like I think we're kind of kindred spirits in that way. Like I think we need riding. There's a certain level of intensity that, some people call it exercising and some people call it exorcising. Dale and I went and rode around, and then I had like being the sales guy that I am, I had some Dale's Pale Ale chilling in the creek down by the waterfall cabin.
Oh my goodness!
Which he later told me was skunked. I didn't know enough to check the brewed on date or whatever. So I have a Dale's Pale Ale sitting in the creek chilling, and we sit on the front porch of this beautiful waterfall cabin at the foot of this gorgeous waterfall. Again, I think it's 43 feet, or maybe we made that up. And I said, Dale, it just comes down to one question, man. Do you believe? And I think I'd heard that somewhere, like, do you believe? And he said, man, thanks for spending some time out here today. And we kind of were going our separate ways. And I said, Dale, one more thing. That Red Bull deal we've been trying to get done, those guys are in town. And I told them that you were in town too. And this is it. They're looking for alternates. This is our drop dead date. Will you meet them at the brewery? And he said, yeah, I'll meet them at the brewery. So I raced back over to the brewery to meet these guys, Jason Hines and a couple other people from Red Bull, and 30 minutes passes and no Dale, and 45 minutes passes and no Dale, and an hour passes and no Dale. And we look outside, and Dale's been there, but he can't get to our table because somebody is stopping him all along the way to talk to him. Ultimately, he gets to the table, and the folks from Red Bull start telling him, like, internationally televised, NBC, Signature Series, 13 million impressions, or whatever, like these
big numbers and fancy things.
Yeah, like big numbers that we, I was like, Dale, it'll be awesome, man. Like we weren't that savvy, right? So evidently he had told a local fella here, Parker Platt, no on like a Wednesday. And on Thursday, let's say, I'm making that part up, but on Thursday after that meeting, he called his banker and he was under contract the next morning. And so our first project for the bike farm was Shoal Falls Farm out by DuPont, which later became the Reeb Ranch. Reeb is their bike brand. Beer spelled backwards. Lo and behold, man, Red Bull built the world's biggest dirt jumps at the time, I think, something like that. And riders from all over the world came and competed in this event that, man, I could never ride a bike. Like I could only imagine riding a bike like that. But it was really, really cool. And it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to work with Dale and Yaya and Oscar Blues and Red Bull, and we did it to it.
I mean, that was a huge event, not just locally, but for the global bike world. And sometimes I don't think a lot of people, such as yourself and people locally, understand. Like, they don't. Dreamline was huge in the bike world, in the BMX world. All of the top BMX dirt jumpers were there. Like, there were some that were upset because they weren't invited.
That's tough, man, not to get the invite.
So that was huge for you guys. I mean, that was a banging kickoff event.
It was wild. It really, really, really was wild. It was surreal, After Dale acquired the land and we kind of quasi-inked some sort of deal, My mother passed unexpectedly. And then those guys, like a couple weeks later, show up to start building Dreamline. And the head builder, Adam Aloise from Dirt Factory, he had lost his mother too. So we wrapped, we wrapped.
And he's up from Philly area.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. So we had, a little bit in common. And I met some really good dudes, and some of them I think may have gotten their first exposure to a mountain bike.
That is true. They did.
Okay. Yeah. I
Yep.
thought so, man.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty funny because they were kind of like, we want to ride those bikes, and I was like, right on, let's go do this,
Mm-hmm.
Those guys all came to our wedding. So my mother passes on March 14th. On May 24th, Eva and I get married out this beautiful old farm, Shoal Falls Farm, right? Which was becoming the bike farm at Oscar Blues Ranch, right?
Yeah.
We were building it out, and we got married out there. And all those dudes came to our wedding, and it was priceless.
Yeah.
There are some great stories.
Those dudes bring a good time.
It was entertaining.
Yeah.
They all went to the local thrift store.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them tried, and some of them tried to be funny, right? And, in their defense, it was a last minute, like, hey, you guys should come to our wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've been out here working together, I don't know, a few weeks at that point, maybe a month, right? I was like, you guys should definitely come to the wedding. So, I mean, there were some pretty entertaining outfits.
So they're hitting up the Goodwill here in Brevard.
Yeah.
Getting some sweet gear.
Yeah. Yeah, some misfitting. But, like, cummerbunds, tuxedo. I mean, it was great, dude.
Yeah.
They were, it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was the first location.
And so then you transitioned to another location that was just outside of Pisgah Forest, inbound to the forest from town.
Mm-hmm. We did. I would be surprised if more than 2 or 3 people locally knew that story. But
Do you want to talk about it?
long and short was the local marketing department for Oscar Blues put out a press release around Dreamline. And, it was a page and a half of Oscar Blues and Red Bull and a sentence about the bike farm. And I'd been running a chainsaw, for 5 weeks. And I'd been slapping dirt for a month. And I'd been scrubbing old cabins and barn apartments in this manky old house. And man, it didn't feel good, and I reached out and was like, it feels tough. And Chad, who I consider a friend, was like, dude, you got an idea and we got money. This is how this works. He's like, if it doesn't feel good, you can move on. And that was, Chad is a pretty straight to the point dude. And fortunately, Yaya was here locally. And remember, I just lost my mother, right? So I went and sat down with Yaya. I think Eva and I both went and sat down with Yaya. And I said, Yaya, I feel like I'm getting steamrolled. And she said, honey, you are. She said, you got the idea. She said what Chad said. You got the idea. We got the money. And I think, as I recall, and this might be revisionist history, but as I recall, Yaya said something to the effect of, if you want to work for Oscar Blues, I'll see to it that you get paid what you need to get paid. You'll be doing what you want to do, but you'll be doing it for us.
That's not your vision.
And I said, yeah, that's not my vision. And she said, well, honey, you should go do it somewhere else then. And I said, thank you for being honest with me.
Mm-hmm.
That was a powerful moment. And we moved off that property, but we would go back and we would sit down with Yaya. And we had like this $30,000 budget that Dale had given us. And that was to do like the barn apartment, the waterfall cabin, and this little farmhouse. Well, Yaya had spent like $30K on flooring in the farmhouse because she moved into it. We moved out and she moved in, right? She was like, if y'all aren't here, I'm here.
Yeah.
And that felt right to me, It felt good. And so we would go visit it from time to time. And she had blown our $30K budget on flooring. And I remember her opening the door one time and she said, now, would you come back to this? And I said, yeah, I love you to death. But we're doing our own thing at this point. We've moved on, And yeah, man, I loved her to her dying day. And, Dale and I didn't have opportunity to speak for a while until her memorial. She passed and saw Dale. And again, I think Dale and I are a little bit of kindred spirits. And I think we were both probably crying and we both just hugged and he hugged Eva. And that was kind of the end of that. But in the meantime, a local family actually reached out to Jordan at the hub and said, hey, we've got this idea. They knew each other from the cross-country racing world. And Jordan said, you ought to call Cashin and Eva. And he did. And he kind of was like, man, I got 3 times the acreage, 3 times the vertical, all adjacent to Pisgah National Forest. And we sell jet engines. We don't sell beers and bicycles. I don't want anything to do with your business. You just come out here and you pay your lease and you do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't that quick, but he very quickly figured out who we were and realized that what we were talking about doing, we could pull up stakes and be off of his property, the family property, and a year later you'd never know we were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately what they wanted, right?
Yeah.
They wanted stewards. They wanted somebody on their land that helped cover some of their expenses. And now, in 2021, it's exactly what we're doing. We're pulling up stakes and we're moving off that property. And I hope in a year you never knew we were there.
Pisgah will take itself back over.
It's incredible. Yeah. We are visitors here.
You've transitioned to this new location now, which is a little closer to town, a little closer pedaling distance to what some would say are the more friendlier to ride trails for out-of-towners versus the steep climb out of the bike farm to Turkey Pen.
That's an understatement.
Yes. And you've changed the business a little bit. Talk to me about that.
We have, man. I think we got to this place where we were kind of going where the wind blew a little bit. And somewhere along the way, a campground. That initial vision, that drawing that I was talking about where my mom's guarding her cash crop with a shotgun. Did you ever see that Shimano advertisement that said it's not what we do, it's who we are? And I can't remember the riders, but they were sitting around a campfire and there was a cabin in the background with bikes leaning up against the porch.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's not what we do, it's who we are, right? That was kind of the vision. And then lo and behold, we're welcoming hundreds of people and then thousands of people to our campground. And I'm getting to meet a few of them. That became, there's a longer story there, but my mother's passing meant that our willing and able grandparents were 1,700 miles away in Colorado.
Yeah.
Eva has also all along worked for her parents, predominantly managing her father's business. And he's 78, and in the, we hope it's a nice long last chapter, but he's in the last chapter of a really beautiful career as an artist. And if you know anything about art, which I don't, typically artists find fame after their death, right? So there's a lot of...
Unfortunately so.
Yeah, there's a lot of, or not even fame perhaps, but just any solvency, I guess their work becomes more valuable after they are no longer making their work. It's a supply thing. And, it becomes a conversation about legacy and about foundations and about, what do we do with Dad's art?
Yeah.
Right? And so a few years back in 2016, we realized that we had a logistical issue on our hands. We needed to spend some time in Colorado. As long as Eva was here, it was hard for her to run her business.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we were there, it was hard for me to run my business.
Yep.
And this is a personality thing, Mangler. I think there's plenty of people that would say, hey, I can run a campground remotely, right? I couldn't. It was so built on who we are. We had a phenomenal team, but I would come back and I would see things, and I would see things that only maybe I would see, and it was just increasingly uncomfortable to try and run that style of business remotely. So we opted to cease campground operations and just focus on our guide and coaching services. And so 2021 sees us, just as a guide and coaching service here in this new location with ride in, ride out access directly into Pisgah on the property that the fine folks from Pilot Cove own.
Nice.
Yeah.
How was 2020 for the guiding and coaching side of your business?
Oh man, bonkers, right? We just didn't have enough information. So we closed a little bit ahead of the executive order.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we were closed for the last 3 weeks of March or second half of March, something like that, all of April and the first bit of May. Those are like big spring break months.
Yeah,
right?
those are money making months.
They're
for you
big
guys.
months, right? And I was like, oh man, well, we'll piece together a year and just hobble through and see what happens. I mean, it was like drinking from a fire hydrant.
Yeah,
You know, like we were one of the things that people could do safely, right? And Johnny couldn't go to football camp, and Johnny couldn't go to baseball camp, but Johnny could come learn to ride a mountain bike. You know,
Yeah.
so we were doing a boatload of coaching, like with local kids, right? Like, which was awesome. And we were like PE class for some kids. We had some kids come to us like, you know, for 5-6 Fridays in a row, right? Like we were their PE class. And then, you know, just overall regional tour, like if you can't get on a plane,
Yeah.
it's pretty good for our business.
Yeah.
You know, outdoor recreation, you know, as the rest of the outdoor recreation industry, we had a pretty wild year. So it was super ironic to get that email. And I got an email from the gentleman that is the VP of finance for the family operation that owns the other property. And he said, "Hey, Cashin, give me a call."
You're
And
like,
I said,
"Uh-oh."
"Oh no, I know exactly what this is, right?" Because we had done everything by email. I sent him our financials and a check once a month for 7 years, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right. And so when he said, "Give me a call," I knew exactly what it was. And the truth is, man, I don't know that I would have had the gumption to cut the camp and glamping off.
It was taxing on you.
It was taxing, but you know, it was cool. You know, like people loved it, right? And that fueled me somehow. And man, I got a kid. You know, like I have expenses, right? So cutting off 46% of our gross revenue in one fell swoop, I needed some guidance, and the property owners gave it to me. Kind of like, here you go.
Here's your answers that you've been looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
You're being told now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're set up here in Pisgah Forest, kind of behind Walmart and, you know, the RIP Bilo. Most importantly, you're much closer to Sora now.
Yes, very important. In fact, while I've been out here moving, I've been getting takeout from them probably 3 or 4 days a week.
Oh, wow.
I love those folks. They're good people.
Yeah, good people.
Yeah, good people.
So for all you listeners out there, Sora, the sushi spot in the Walmart shopping center in Pisgah Forest, definitely a go-to spot. So what's going forward with Bike Farm look like for you guys now?
You know, it's funny because I was going to say our primary focus, but then I caught myself because my primary focus is to be a good husband and father. And Lord knows I've got some work to do in that category. But our focus is stabilizing the guide and coaching services out here at the new location. We also have an incredible fleet from Yeti Cycles. We've got a brand new fleet, 17 bikes, 2021 Yeti Cycles. They're Turk frames, which is crazy, right? Like I don't think they put bikes on their demo trucks this year. And we've got got 2 more bikes than we had last year.
Wow.
So, you know, we're just focused on getting people on bikes out here at this new location, stabilizing, catching my breath, you know. I think more than the physical element of the move, the mental, element of like, you know, knowing that something needed to change and then getting some guidance, like I said. And, you know, I think there was a lot of emotion tied up in the move and in the change to the model.
Well, you put so much heart and soul and sweat equity into the other place. I mean, that's not easy to walk away from.
It was not at all. You know, and it's one of those things where it's not until you're walking away that you realize how not easy it is. You know, like it's like, oh man. And my brother came up and, you know, we had named this trail over there Edda's Lane. Well, my oldest niece is Edda and my youngest is Lane. So there's some like dominion in that, right? So I had my brother come up and like pull that sign with me. You know, like we grabbed one side of the sign together and pulled it up. And yeah, it's I love that piece of earth. I'm biased, man. You know, I'm in the tourism industry here. You know, I'm kind of like, well, I don't want things to change that much. You know, like, so I you know, I kind of love, I've always loved big chunks of land. Land was, I mean, you know, that was it came from family farm growing up, lawn maintenance business. I've always loved land. So yeah, it's bittersweet to let go of that beautiful chunk of land.
How do you think customers are going to enjoy this new spot?
Man, I can tell you that the driveway is way easier. I can tell you that the parking situation is way easier. I can tell you that the proximity to the forest is is awesome. You know, I really think that people will love it. You know, I think that we have an awesome skills coaching area that we've developed over here. Our guide and coaching services were uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Right. We built everything out over a few months, and then like we flipped the switch one day.
Yeah.
Right. And so that stuff has been uninterrupted. But I think in many ways, you know, this is a really excellent, I'll call it spiraling up, right?
I like that.
Yeah, we're spiraling up. We're not spiraling down. I think it's a really great location. I think people will enjoy it thoroughly.
Awesome. So how can people easily find you on social media or the interwebs?
You can find us at thebikefarm.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have Instagram and Facebook, The Bike Farm. And you may notice that we moved away from Bike Farm Pisgah. We did that 7 years ago, but it is the Bike Farm.
Yeah.
Right. And you know that's because the Bike Farm might sprout elsewhere.
That is true. Seeds do get transplanted.
Seed saplings and full-grown trees get transplanted. And so can we.
Awesome. Sweet. Thanks, Cashin.
Love you, Mangler.
Love you too.
Yeah, so it's super important to think about what a guiding company can offer you. If you're coming into town and you're going to ride, you're staying with some friends, maybe in Asheville or Brevard, and they're going to give you some routes, but they have to work during the middle of the week, you're probably going to get lost if you're listening to their directions. So picking up one of these guiding companies is pretty important. You know, we have a couple of really high quality ones.
Yeah, I think it's something a lot of people overlook. Guiding companies do more than just, point you down the trail. They also can, let you in on kind of some of the forest etiquette and like how it goes to like, respecting the trails, respecting other users. It's so much more than just like pointing you and towing you into a trail.
Right. And one thing that you could kind of consider too is you can be honest with them about what your skill level is or what kind of ride you want. Where maybe your friends, you've kind of got to puff up a little bit and I'm going to, huck this or shred that, when really you just want to cover some ground and get the most for your money. And that's one thing that a guiding company is going to give you that maybe your buddies aren't.
I have hired guiding services in the past when out traveling. Usually it's been on international trips. Most of the time when Jessica and I are traveling, we sometimes bounce around a lot and we can't commit to certain days or certain times. So usually we end up, self-guiding ourselves. And one of the things that I think a guiding service helps a lot with is, say you're riding down a trail, you come to an intersection, you've had this visualization of the ride that you're going to do, but there's this intersection that pops up and you're like, I don't really remember seeing this on a map. So you got to get your phone out, open Trail Forks or, Mountain Bike Project or whatever app you choose to use, or your paper map, unfold it, look, figure out where you're at. So that's one of the things that hiring a guiding service really helps with, is just navigating trails.
Yeah, 100%. And anybody that knows me, any of my friends out there, I'm not going to name names, but I've gotten a lot of people lost in person.
Right
and
on.
That's why I don't work for a guiding service. So that being said, how's the weather look for the next week?
Man, this week is looking amazing for both bike riding weather and camping weather. The lows getting out to the 40s, the highs in like low 60s. This is great mountain bike weather right here. Although it has been pretty dry, so don't expect hero dirt, but it, like we said last week, at least it's not freeze thaw.
Yeah, roger that, and I apologize to my boss. I'm going to spend some afternoons riding this week.
Oh, that's not a bad thing. Well, that's a wrap on this week's episode, and as always, you can find us on social media. Just search Pisgah Podcast.
If you have ever went glamping and still all of your gear got wet from an overnight rainstorm, go ahead and click subscribe and share with your friends.
Somehow, rain will always get you camping.
Yeah, no matter what, that or, a smoldering cinder is going to burn your tent down more